Beckett Niles had learned to read ruined cities the way other people read the weather. Smoke spirals mapped the shifting winds of violence. Fractured traffic lights blinking over cratered asphalt foretold the next artillery burst. Tonight, the forecasts were lethal. He and Eris, his sable-coated German shepherd, formed the spear point of Task Force Epsilon, a patchwork of nations stalking a rogue warlord through the bones of the capital. Their brief was as stark as it was impossible. Slip past 3 reinforced blocks, reach the telecom tower before dawn, and broadcast an emergency frequency that would let humanitarian convoys roll in without being shelled. Everything between them and that tower was a street of broken promises. Beckett tightened the sling of his rifle, felt the dog's heartbeat through the leash, and exhaled until his breath matched the dog's slow pant. They moved. Concrete dust rose in corkscrews around their boots, carrying ghost scents of burnt sugar and diesel. Somewhere west, a lone radio crackled with an old love song that warped into static when a firefight erupted half a mile away. Beckett ignored the detonations. The symphony of distant gunfire mattered only when Eris's ears flicked toward it. The shepherd was more sensor array than partner, yet to Beckett he was also the last fragment of innocence he still believed in. At Lackland's K-9 school, the pup had darted through a maze of plywood walls, tail swinging like a metronome set to hope, and Beckett had known the war might not devour everything after all. Eris halted at a shattered bus shelter, nostrils trembling. Beckett crouched, letting his hand drift to the dog's shoulder the way instructors taught. Minimal pressure, maximum meaning. A subtle tap, search. The dog glided forward, weaving through shards of windshield until he froze beside a rusted sedan. Beckett saw the tripwire moments before his boot touched it, filament so thin it vanished in moonlight. He mouthed a profanity, cut the wire, and rolled the pipe bomb clear. Behind him, distant footfalls erupted into a rain of metal, the rear guard trading rounds with insurgents they couldn't see. And the city answered with its own thunder, buildings leaning inward as if curious which side would survive the night. They entered an alley painted by firelight from a burning grocery store. Eris's paws splashed through puddles that stank of kerosene and rotten fruit. Every sense screamed ambush. Beckett signaled halt, but the dog was already bristling, growl rumbling deep as hidden artillery. A silhouette appeared, child-sized, clutching a heavy object. Optics confirmed the worst, a boy no older than 10, wrapped in an explosive vest, detonator chained to his wrist. Orders were uncompromising, mission first, no deviations. Yet Beckett thought of mazes built for learning rather than killing. He whispered the word the dog knew since puppyhood, guard. Eris advanced, posture lowered, teeth bared not in menace but in warning, as though telling the boy he still had choices. The child faltered. The boy's detonator clattered onto wet asphalt, a porcelain-thin sound that tilted the night. Beckett bound the child's trembling hands, radioed for an evac squad, and slipped a protein bar into the kid's palm because sugar and mercy sparked the same neurofire. Then the sky reasserted its cruelty. The burning grocery roof collapsed, flames billowing like a crimson lung. Splinters sleeted down, shredding Beckett's sleeve and peppering Eris's vest. The shepherd didn't yelp. He twisted midair to shield the child, and in that impossible reflex, Beckett glimpsed the blueprint of a better world. They sprinted east, navigating blocks that had forgotten their own blueprints. Maps printed last week were already alternate history. Only Eris's nose remained truthful. Where the dog veered, Beckett followed, trusting olfactory cartography older than satellites. Twice Eris detoured to a mound of pulverized brick, paws scraping until muffled moans leaked through, civilians buried alive. Each rescue was a middle finger raised at the arithmetic of acceptable losses. 8 blocks on, Task Force Epsilon regrouped inside the gutted shell of a cinema. NVGs painted everyone the same extraterrestrial green. Even flags felt irrelevant. Captain Ruiz pushed a tablet under Beckett's chin. Armored pickups orbiting the telecom tower, plus a jamming rig bolted to a flatbed. No broadcast, no relief convoy. Dawn would arrive tasting of hunger. Orders were blunt. Hack the jammer, secure the tower stairwells, hold until the text could scream hope through the ether. Someone cracked a joke about last stands. Nobody laughed, but the silence said yes. They dropped into storm sewers, water mid-calf, stench like rusted lungs. Eris half swam, nose skimming the slurry for explosives. At a maintenance hatch he froze, tail rigid as rebar. Beckett followed the dog's gaze. A claymore wired to a proximity sensor, lens blinking inside moss. One wrong ripple and the whole pipe would have flash fried. Beckett's fingers became metronomes. Clip, twist, isolate lead, breathe. The LED died. For 3 seconds nobody inhaled, then foul air flooded back like an insult they were willing to endure. They surfaced behind a convenience store torn to ribs, and the telecom tower loomed like an iron cathedral for broken prayers. Lightning forked distant clouds, rain followed, timid, then vengeful. Water slicked rubble into ankle traps, but also blurred infrared scopes. Beckett thanked the storm, then moved. The service stairs clung to the tower's skin, a vertical trench. A sniper round chipped concrete under Beckett's boot, pitching him forward. Eris dug in, muscles braided steel, keeping them from swan diving 5 stories. Tasting copper, Beckett understood again. Partnership is a contract written in second chances. Level 4, janitor door breached. Hallway stank of ozone and fear. 2 insurgents rounded the bend. Beckett's carbine coughed twice, and echoes folded like origami. Eris's bark ricocheted through ductwork, half victory cry, half warning bell. They pressed on to the server room, racks blinking like a wounded cityscape. The jammer squatted in the center, a malignant heart of spinning LEDs. Tech team 5 minutes out. Beckett barricaded desks into ad hoc ramparts, ammo check, 63 rounds, 2 frags, 1 smoke, and a dog whose courage defied arithmetic. Forehead to fur, he whispered, we buy sunrise. The first breach charge howled, hinges shrieked. Beckett fired disciplined bursts through drywall. Eris dotted between muzzle flashes, a dark comet intercepting shapes that became men. Each takedown felt like ripping pages from an apocalypse scripture. But numbers swelled like tidal waves. The doorframe splintered, Beckett's left ear went mute. Rifle clicked empty. He drew sidearm, vision tunneling. Through smoke he saw the rescued boy, now under medic escort, clutching a field radio tuned to their yet silent uplink. Hope had survived long enough to become agency. The elevator dinged, reinforcements flooding the floor like antibodies. Enemy fire faltered, then receded, boots pounding down stairwells. Beckett exhaled a prayer he didn't actually believe. Eris collapsed beside him, tongue lolling, eyes still fierce. Ruiz's voice crackled. Uplink green in 3, 2, static cleared. And over the ruined capital, a single stubborn beacon began to pulse the coordinates of mercy.
For 91 heartbeats, the beacon stuttered back and forth across the ruined capital, an SOS turned lighthouse, before the insurgents realized their siege was dissolving from the inside out. Gunfire burned through the server room barricade again, but this time it felt panicked, unfocused, the sound of a tide trying to fight the moon. Beckett shoved a fresh magazine home, spit blood, and kept an eye on the makeshift uplink. A glowing diode the size of a thumbnail, pulsing life into a grid that had been flatlined for months. Far below, every civilian radio still intact, cheap hand cranks, cracked smartphones, hospital intercoms running on backup generators, began chiming the same coordinates. Aid columns idled and border dust could finally roll. Field surgeons 6 districts away knew which alleys to sprint down with morphine. Mothers crouched in basements memorized safe corridor call signs. All of it hinged on an antenna jury-rigged with duct tape and the battered dog watching the doorway like a saint who traded his halo for fangs. Outside, the storm shredded what remained of insurgent comms, so the warlord reverted to spectacle. He ordered a gun truck fitted with twin 23mm cannons to rake the tower's mid-levels until the whole structure came down. Beckett heard the engines before he saw the muzzle flash, big, throaty diesel throttles echoing through the wet night like iron lungs clearing themselves. The first burst stitched the concrete facade, vomiting rebar and glass. Shards jittered off server racks in a crystalline rain. One slashed Beckett's cheek, another cracked his NVG lens. He killed the goggles, switched to naked sight, and the world collapsed into lightning-lit chiaroscuro. Every flash-flooded hallway looked like war's own cathedral of broken ribs. 2 minutes till convoy heads in, Captain Ruiz shouted over the net. Hold. The word was so simple, it was obscene. Air sprang before Beckett registered why, slamming him sideways as the tower shuddered. A shell gouged the wall where Beckett's skull had been, leaving molten rivulets scarring cinder block. The shepherd's flank lit with crimson, yet the dog didn't whimper. He only snapped at air, as if daring the bullets to manifest as something he could tear apart. Beckett dragged him into a stairwell ankle-deep in water from a ruptured pipe. Every legend about soldiers carrying their brothers up impossible climbs suddenly felt weightless next to the reality of hauling 90 pounds of silent loyalty up switchback steps while masonry exploded around them. But floor by floor they ascended, 3rd, 5th, 9th, until they breached the rooftop hatch. Up there, the night widened into a panoramic hell. The Capitol skyline, once neon and smug, now a ragged ECG of smoke columns, each pulse a story that might never get told. Directly below, the gun truck prowled the courtyard, turrets tilting. Beckett keyed his last smoke grenade, counted to 3, and fastballed it off the parapet. A white wall mushroomed, the gunners coughed curses. Beckett unclipped the collapsible Carl G. rocket slung across his back, thumbed the primer, and rested one knee under Eris's chest so the dog would feel him there. He remembered a training officer insisting that a combat deployment was just geometry, angles, vectors, arcs. But no theorem covered the physics of a man firing blind through rain, trusting wind and luck more than trigonometry. He squeezed, the backblast scorched puddles into steam, the rocket vanished into fog. Half a breath later, the courtyard erupted orange, sending shockwaves ricocheting up the tower like applause from the underworld. Silence, then a rising chorus. Distant engines, but this time the cadence was organized, disciplined. Through the dying smoke, beams of white headlights speared the darkness. The humanitarian convoy barreling in, armored ambulances painted with red crescents, food carriers stacked like rolling pantries. Gunmen, now foot soldiers with sudden doubts, broke ranks and scattered. The warlord's men still atop adjacent rooftops tried to funnel RPGs into the street, but Ruiz's snipers had climbed water towers hours ago. Their crack-crack cadence stitched the sky. Eris finally sagged. Blood mingled with rain until it was impossible to tell which was which. Beckett pressed gauze, feeling absurdly calm. The world might be ending and beginning at once, but triage was eternal. "Medevac bird inbound," said Ruiz. "Give me smoke blue." Beckett popped the canister. Cobalt haze swirled into the storm, a signal flare for rescue and perhaps something holier. Moments later, rotor wash flattened the rain. Medics rappelled, and Eris was cinched into a sling that made him look almost regal, a wounded king ascending. Beckett followed on the next line, boots leaving the rooftop just as the first sunrise in weeks dared to thread through the clouds. They airlifted Eris to a field hospital stitched together from shipping containers. The surgeons removed 2 fragments of steel, one lodged millimeters from the spine. They warned amputation. The dog refused by simply standing on all fours the next dawn, tail twitching as if to say eulogies were premature. Beckett slept in a folding chair, waking every hour to make sure the chest still rose. When it did, he whispered stories about meadows nowhere near war. 9 months later, peacekeepers patrolled the capital's rebuilt avenues. The telecom tower's top floors remained blackened, left that way on purpose, a vertical cenotaph. But at its base stood a bronze statue, a soldier kneeling beside a dog, both facing east, where the sun climbs first.
The plaque read, "Partners in battle, beacons in peace." School children touched the paw for luck before exams. Refugee families left flowers torn from median strips. And some evenings, a lanky teen, once a boy in an explosive vest, came by to sweep litter from the monument. He'd grown into a volunteer interpreter for the aid clinics, his detonator scars now mere punctuation in a longer sentence. Beckett and Eris returned only once, chauffeured in a battered Humvee repainted civilian white. The dog, now grizzled, limped to the statue, sniffed, and laid down as if acknowledging an old comrade who agreed that memory is heavier than any rucksack. Beckett sat beside him, back against bronze, watching birds rebuild nests in the tower's exposed girderwork. He realized the city no longer smelled solely of cordite. Bakery yeast and engine oil and river fog had elbowed their way back into the air. Eris's ears twitched at those peacetime odors, curious yet content. Beckett scratched the fur between them and felt the familiar heartbeat, steady and stubborn. They had once bought sunrise with bullets and resolve. Now they purchased dusk with silence and simply being present. And in that quiet transaction, Beckett finally understood the dog's ultimate lesson. Battles end, partnerships don't.